I'm a development communicator by training and profession. I studied development communications here at the College of UPLB, College of DevCom, and now I lead our knowledge and advocacy work for the Forest Conservation Unit of UN Environment Program. So how did I end up here? As a development communicator, for me, communications should always have a purpose. And for me, that purpose would be to, like, how can I make a contribution to improving the lives of majority of the people? And when you link it to forest conservation, you would see that in the fringes of forests, that's where majority of people who are helping save the environment, basically, but they don't get anything in return, but they're the ones really suffering with no food on their table. They're the ones being affected by drought when we destroy the forests, or when their livelihoods get like destroyed whenever we destroy trees. So that's just very, for me, that's my purpose. I don't want that to happen, not for those people living within the forest or in the fringes of it, but also there's impact to all of us. It's a very difficult question because my work in the UN, like when you ask like to other people, like, what do you think I do? A lot of them will have this vision. When you do development work, you put on the UN vest and you go to communities and help them. But what I really do is a lot of desk work, a lot of policy work, a lot of research, writing, a lot of advocacy behind the door meetings with government counterparts to help influence how they would change some of their policies on forest conservation. So it's really hard to identify what are some of the quick wins that we had, because policy making takes 10, 20, 30 years to take effect. But I guess one of them will be like when 2 years ago we had a campaign in China around conserving rosewood in Beijing. And in the city of Beijing, a lot of the young people already don't know where are the forests or why is it important, and that rosewood is actually already endangered. And for me, when we did the survey before and after, we saw a shift in the awareness. But more than that, the local government already started to have some discussions and meetings about how to save rosewood. I mean, it sounds very small, but it's usually the start of policymaking. In very simple terms, what my team does is that we try to advise governments to create policies for their forests so that they will be able to sell forest carbon credits to other governments, to companies, so that they will get some funding to support their forest conservation efforts. And what I specifically do as the knowledge and advocacy coordinator for my team is so it involves first a lot of research. So I work with universities to have a real value on what's the real value of forests, like the water regulation value, air quality. So how does it help? And then we translate scientific evidence into policy documents that we would then use to meet with governments and advocate for example, it's whether it's increasing forest carbon price, whether it's including indigenous communities in decision making, whether it's giving youth a voice in the table, or whether it's just around land use mapping, how they can assign land to whom and where. That's yeah, that's all based on science and local knowledge. So our team supports like the UNFCCC, the UN climate conferences. This year it's going to happen in Belém, in in the middle of the Amazon in Brazil. We had started our advocacy 2 years before. So again, starting from having the research and evidence needed to convince not just Brazilian politicians, but politicians that own, like where whose countries own majority of the forests, um, and then trying to be able to almost have a coalition between these countries, because in the UN we can't really go directly to communities, but we need to work through governments. So we advise the governments on how to design these policies. And in every single policy, it's always for us, it's important to have these concepts around safeguards, doing no harm, but to communities, like making sure they are included. The concept of free, prior, and informed consent is also very important. That's in some of the governments, that's not always the case. So we do a lot of advocacy around this with governments, and using the power of communications, then we try to translate whatever would be the results of the UN climate talks, bring it back to the governments, who will then bring it to the communities. Because my field is male dominated. So kitang kita ko yon, like lalo na when you go to communities, the community members would, like, you would ask them, okay, let's have a meeting about how we can turn this patch of land into carbon credits. The women will stay at home and the men will attend the meeting. And so you really need to make an effort to bring women's voices without excluding men. And at the same time, the people that, when we come to the communities, it's also usually men who go and say, okay, this is how you measure the pH of the soil, and how you measure the carbon stocks in this patch of land. So I think that also needs to change. Like, we need more women, um, not just the ones like doing this work, but also as leaders, because we also bring something different. Um, so women, and yeah, I've heard stories also in communities, like when I was in the Amazon. It's a very like macho society. Like, you're not allowed as a woman to speak in meetings. So how do you do that without disrespecting the culture? It's like you cannot just say speak, right? Because no, it's not my culture to speak, and men will be angry. So there's a lot of systems change that needs to take, and this takes so much time, and the impacts are sometimes not tangible. So to do this kind of work, you need to be very patient, and you need to be so understanding of the context of everything, because you're not going to get results. Like, you can write a project document with beautiful results, you're not going to get it if you don't understand, if you're not patient enough, if you don't work with the communities, knowing all their culture and all their traditions, and taking time to help somehow respect it but still make an impact. So in my line of work, we are always confronted with all of these Excel files. We have donor reporting forms. We have all of these impact indicators and so on. And it's always like very quantitative, because you need to be able to measure impact. But a lot of the real impact that is not measurable, sometimes that for me, I put more value on will be when we, for example, do our meetings. There is a person from the Ministry of Finance, a person from the Ministry of Environment. They don't see eye to eye, but when we bring them together, they start talking, discussing, arguing, but at the end of the day, they start collaborating. And sometimes that's not written in those impact reports. But for me, the impact of what I do is really when you start building these bridges, because at the end of the day, everything is interconnected. So we need to be able to collaborate with each other, with different ministries, different people from different walks of life. And to achieve that, it's always takes a lot of time, discussion, arguments, but in the end, that's just worth it. Yes, and that's actually the critic of carbon markets, because yes, we do try to put value on forests, but at the same time, the argument is if you don't, then you would lose it. Like, what other means can you see to protect forests?